Hello, Humboldt, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at the current edition of the North Coast Journal. My name is Tanya Shrum, and I'm sitting in for Dave Frank this week. We are joined, as usual, by the North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and the arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome, both of you.
Hey, Tanya, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and it's a glorious week to be here.
It's so nice to have you with us.
So much glory. I hear that hint. I see what you did there.
Dropping my little hint there. It's an exciting week, and we have some wonderful news stories to go over today. Thad, would you like to begin talking about what's on this week's cover?
Absolutely, Tanya. We have a wonderful story from Ali Hostler, who is the editor of the Two Rivers Tribune out in Hoopa, who covered the 20th annual Salmon Run for us. And the Salmon Run, for folks who don't know, was started, as I said, 20 years ago by 4 high school students, actually. I want to read their names so I make sure I get them right. Erica Tracy, Tasha James, Kyla Bigay, and Chelsea Reed. And it was started, again, 20 years ago after the large fish kill in the Klamath River in 2002. And it was part of a kind of an upwelling of Native activism, looking at ways to bring attention to the crisis on the river and ultimately to do something about it, which we're now well on the road to doing with dam removal taking place partly this year and then mostly next year. But this year, for the 20th anniversary, they got those 4 organizers back to participate in the run again. And so Ali was able to catch up with each of them. And it was just really neat to hear them talk about the inspiration they had as high school students to start this run, and then kind of how amazing it is to see it still going 20 years later. They thought this was going to be a one-off or two-off thing and didn't realize how enduring it would be. And I'll also say, Tanya, that when I started looking at this as a potential story for the journal to cover, one of the things I thought was, well, the dams are coming down this year, so maybe this is the last Salmon Run. Not so fast, as the organizers say, and as Ali, very adeptly explains in the story, is because salmon populations are so imperiled and under such threat that the run will continue, and this is just the last iteration in which it will pass 4 dams on the lower Klamath River. But that it will continue to bring attention to needed restoration efforts in other parts of the river and tributaries.
And I thought it was really interesting, the constellation of tribal involvement that has really grown from this over the years. And it seems like it's a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, the run, stretches 350 miles mostly along the Klamath watershed, but it crosses from Yurok and Kuruk ancestral lands to the Hoopa Valley tribe, and then up to the Klamath tribes in Oregon. And these, I think it's easy for white people especially to view tribes as even local regional tribes as kind of a monolith with similar interests, and that's just really not at all the case probably on any subject. But it hasn't been the case about river restoration and water rights, and these are groups that have disagreed pretty vehemently at times. Worth noting, the Hoopa Valley tribe was not a party to any of the Klamath dam removal agreements. And so, these are groups that have had divergent interests or divergent views, even on a central piece like the Klamath and Trinity Rivers that have been so central to their cultures and diets and economies for so long. And so the run, as some of the organizers talked about in the piece, told Ali about, is really a chance for them to get together and work together to bring attention to this kind of common interest and put kind of those differences aside. And I think there is something really powerful about that element of cooperation.
I think it's also really powerful bringing that activism to the youth of any community, and that's an amazing thing. I think it'll be really interesting to see if our better rainfall will bring any relief to the environmental catastrophes that are facing, our area.
Yeah, no, the rainfall has definitely been helpful, and you touched on the generational aspect, and Allie doesn't dive too deep into that in this piece about kind of the reverberating impacts of getting young people involved in this effort. But it's something we've touched on in other Klamath Dam removal coverage is how, this has been a sustained effort over 20 plus years now, and how really there are plenty of instances when in which younger tribal members have essentially picked up that torch from their parents, and their parents, they saw their parents going to meetings and going to rallies and stuff to press for dam removal. And when their parents got of a certain age, a younger generation has taken over. And reading Allie's, wonderful piece about the run and the student involvement in the run with kids of all ages, I really can't help but wonder how much that was part of planting those seeds of activism and awareness in this next generation that is really bringing dam removal to becoming a reality.
I like to see all that hard work pay off for this entire community.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting time, even though there are very formidable challenges remaining as far as bringing salmon populations back to a healthy level.
Absolutely. Do we have any more thoughts about that story before moving over to our wonderful Jennifer and see what she has to share?
Just another mention of how grateful I am to Allie Hostler and the Two Rivers Tribune for bringing us this coverage that we really wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And Allie, as a tribal member, has I think has an insight into the story that other writers maybe wouldn't. So I'm just really grateful for her.
I really hope that everyone picks up and reads this article, because I think this is a window into something that not everybody gets to enjoy and be educated on.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I second Thad's enthusiasm for Allie Hostler and would like to point everybody to, if you just go in our search bar and look through pieces that she's done for us in the past, including some photography and really great stuff.
Side note, since we're just having our Allie appreciation hour, she was also, when there was the monster fires out there last summer, right. Allie was the point person at the Hoopa Rodeo grounds for the pet sanctuary, where essentially they took in all of the pets that had nowhere to go, including livestock and large animals and horses, and cared for them for several weeks at that spot. So she is a vital community member.
Well, with that, let's turn our attention over to Jennifer. And what do you have to share with us this week?
Okay, from your shrubbery and from your previous mention of Glory, I would like to know how deep you are into the Kinetic universe.
I am quite deep into the Kinetic universe. This was unfortunately my first time as a strict viewer and not a participant. That was a different world to be a spectator, for sure. But I still walked away with a bribe, and my shrubbery is proudly displayed today.
I'm going to assume that the shrubbery came from the Knights Who Say Be.
The Knights Who Say Be. Absolutely.
That's right.
That was
for you young people. Yeah, for you young people out there, watch more Monty Python.
I completely, wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
If that's inside baseball, you need to get on the Monty Python train.
So the Knights Who Say Be had an elaborate contraption, and my favorite part, and there's a picture in our paper, there's like a 2-page photo spread of Mark McKenna's photos. We had 3 days of photos. The first day from staffer Ollie Hancock, and then day 2 and 3 from Mark McKenna, who has been chasing the Kinetic vehicles for
The
I don't
glory.
even know how long.
Chasing the glory.
He's like a dog chasing cars. So anyway, but there's a great picture of the Knights Who Say Be handing out their bribes, favors, etc., and wearing crochet armor, which is the cutest thing in the world.
Was precious, absolutely precious.
And it won them, among other things, the Pageantry Award, which is no small feat.
No, and I definitely concur that they were the ones to take the prize this year.
So when you participated, were you like pedaling along?
I have been fortunate enough to be pit crew in 3 different years. Back when the Mad River Brewing Company had their entry. And
was that the Big Shark?
It was the years that I ran it. It was the Fifi. There was the Franken Fifi year and the Poodle Parade and the Bavarian Beer Bitch.
It's coming back to me. It's coming back to me. Well, there is all kinds of craziness, and I will share with you a couple of the winners. I encourage you to go to, if you can open up the paper and see these great photos, but there's more. Go to northcoastjournal.com and you can see 3 days of slideshow insanity, some on land, some on sea. Because as you know, and again, newbies in town, Kinetic is a 3-day race that starts on the Arcata Plaza, goes down the Manila Dunes, which is like a tumble you don't want to take on foot, much less in a giant buggy that looks like a stuffed dog. And then I think back up. They have to come back up, right?
They after Dead Man's Drop, it's a gentle cruise to Halverson Park at that day one.
So for day 1, and then there's an overnight.
Yeah.
They start again, and they have to head down to the launch into Humboldt Bay, where they must go waterborne, and then hopefully they make it back to shore, and then.
They have to get out.
That's true. Coming back out, you can't get help. It has to just be you and your crew.
If you're
there's no crab crane. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're trying to make that ace.
That's right. And then you go usually cycling for a zillion miles to down to Ferndale, where the Main Street finish line is. After the Veterans Parade happens, the streets clear, and then it gets weird. But among the winners, the first place grand championships were Trashlantis, which had a big whale on the front of it and looked like it had just emerged from the sea. Very garbagey little statement on ocean ecology. The best engineering, which is a tricky one, right? And not always the most glamorous and crazy, but this year it went to the hot pink rabbit-eared Team Goddess rig that was called, what was it called? Bunny Gears Up. And it has a giant bunny head on the top. The art went to the Glorious Gaddle, which was goose themed. And geese are mean, but not these geese. They're just artistic. And Sparky the Kinetic Foster Dog was our speed winner, making it in 9 hours and 24 minutes.
Wow. That is not an easy feat.
I don't even want to watch a movie that's 9 hours and 24 minutes, much less bike uphill, but they did it. And then, of course, pageantry too, the Knights Who Say Be. It's crazy. And they actually have awards too for when you screw up, which is wonderful. Looking at the list of awards is almost as long as the list of entrants, because there are awards for everything. There are awards for like this Rutabaga Queen's favorite one. And there are also awards for when you go in the water, if you flip over, if you have like a water disaster, they will give you an award for the best water disaster. Likewise, for eating it on the way down the sandy Dead Man's Drop, you will get an award. The water spill, the best water spill was taken by Grateful Squid, which is an enormous red squid with tentacles flying out the back, just going down the street. I always wonder about people who are like, long haul truckers just going by. What do they think? And then the dunes took Rat Rod down, and Rat Rod sustained major damage, but still completed the race. Good for them.
They were local. I watched them down my street doing their brake tests the week before.
Were you concerned?
I thought they looked pretty solid, so I was surprised when they fell apart there on Dead Man's Drop.
I mean, that's a solidity. I meant, or were you concerned to see a giant rat rolling down your street?
I think that when you're getting close to kinetic madness, you should expect the unexpected.
So true. So true. But yeah, so please go and look at those photos because it's only once a year and it's always different. It's always totally nuts. It'll give you a smile.
It is one of the area's finest weekends, I will say. I know I'm biased, but we are going to try not to keep leaving Thad out in the cold and see what else he has to share with us today.
Well, we wanted to highlight also this week the last in a really important 4-part series history columns that Alex Service, the curator down at the Depot Museum, has shared with us that actually first ran in the Ferndale Enterprise about a little-known period of Humboldt County history that occurred after Chinese expulsion, a controversy around a Eel River Canneries effort to bring a majority Chinese workforce to the cannery to operate it for a single summer in 1906.
This was a really interesting article. I always love to read history of Humboldt County and where we've been and, transpose that to where we are today, especially for marginalized communities.
Absolutely, and it gets dark, and there's lots of chapters of Humboldt history that we collectively know and kind of collectively recognize the darkness, and there's times when reading about the lesser known chapters. And Alex does a wonderful job of telling these stories through newspaper coverage of the day, and so you're really hearing about it in the voices and the tones of the day, and it is appalling, frankly. And the casual racism is just really, really troubling and really pervasive in the coverage.
I appreciated not only his warning in the byline, but I also appreciated that they found that one section talking about the progressives of the day. I really appreciated that toward the end of the story.
Absolutely.
It is interesting, Alex. So if you go down to the Fortino Depot Museum, Alex, she is the curator down there, and she knows all. She has a bizarre amount of knowledge about the rodeo history too, and she's contributed to the local book on the rodeo. But she does a really great job, as Thad said, pulling from the newspapers at the time, which really they work as a kind of a barometer for, the thought of the time. Some of the things that she's done for us in the past, like she did another piece about the cannery let me see, was that last year or was that this year? I can't remember.
The series, I think it was late last year.
Okay. And, but this one really focuses on something interesting, which is when, we think about racism and exclusionary policies as being about economic anxiety, right? And, that the Chinese expulsion had something to do partly with the panic over employment, right? Like we see now, and we see all these people who are saying, oh, we can't have immigrants because they're taking American jobs. And we see how that feeds into racism. We see how those two things twine together. But in this case, there was a big salmon industry, right? And they have all this fish that they need to sell. And of course, canning it makes it sellable longer. And they were really struggling. The townspeople, white townspeople, were really struggling with whether or not they could stand to have Chinese laborers make them more money. And in many cases, they decided, no, we would rather not make this money. And we'd rather pay these workers the contract that they were promised, and pay their salaries and not have them in town doing the work so that we can sell salmon. It was wild.
Well,
It was.
and then further, salt and preserve our salmon as opposed to can it, and which means selling it at a fraction of the price. Absolutely a case of, cutting off your nose to maintain your racism. It was just an awful story. But I do want to say that in the front end of the North Coast Journal this week, we have a letter from John Fromm, who is the president of the Humboldt Del Norte Labor Council, who read the prior installations of Alex's series and the way that labor was used as a cudgel of racism in 1906, more than a century ago. And he felt so compelled by the story to kind of come out and say, never again, that, we're as the primary union in Humboldt County, we are working for the employment and the equality of all people. And never again will labor be used in this kind of way, which I thought was encouraging.
I definitely think so.
It's interesting too, because the Journal also is, the Journal as a company owns the Ferndale Enterprise, where again, this series originally ran. And the Enterprise is one of the papers that's quoted in Alex's work being, I believe the term is hella racist, over and over through the years. And, that is something, that's a legacy that, along with the wonder of having a paper that's made it past a century and having this legacy paper that you're working with, you also have to take the bad parts of those legacies, right? And some of that is the Ferndale Enterprise's responsibility in, to some extent, fomenting racism.
And going back to that educates the present and the future of where we came and hopefully what we can avoid in the future and make this a more diverse and inclusive area.
Absolutely. And I'll just say that, reading through, these 4 columns by Alex, it's impossible, I think, not to be struck by just a lot of the parallels in both national and local discourse today, whether it's about immigration and labor, or it's about othering of certain communities, whether it be LGBTQ plus community or others. There's, take out some of the slurs and targeted bigotry, and there's a lot of parallels in the talking points that we're still hearing today, and that's just incredibly sad.
This is all very important information for everyone to pick up and educate themselves on. I would like to throw it back to you, Thad, in the brief time we have left. If there's anything else you want to mention that's going on in the Journal.
Yeah, I would just mention that we have a continuation of our coverage about the Title IX issues at Cal Poly Humboldt, and particularly the California State University's audit of Title IX programs at all 23 campuses. So Ollie Hancock, our staff writer, has a summation of where things stand and a little bit of a nod to where things go. And so pick that up and then tune in to future coverage of ongoing Title IX reform at Cal Poly Humboldt.
All right. Thank you, Thad. And thank you, Jennifer. That's gonna kind of be our time for this week. So the current edition of the North Coast Journal with all of these articles is available on newsstands today. Pick that up. You can also find this information 24/7 at northcoastjournal.com. I want to thank you both for your time, and I really appreciate you letting me warm the chair this week.